Guys, we did it. We got the white whale.
We got him.
We tied him down. We have him hostage here at the Four Seasons in our room. But on a serious note, Wayne, you're so generous with your time. It's been a pleasure working with you at TNT. Yeah. And obviously, I also got to thank these guys, because without the Spittin Chiclets podcast, I probably don't even get the chance to get to meet you and now work with you. Folks, the Great One. And normally we start out, Wayne, by listing all the accomplishments, but I think that would waste about half of our time here. We get to
we only got an hour.
We'll miss our flights home.
The way it's going will be one less in about a year and a half. We can revisit it.
So thank you so much for joining us. And the way we do it here on the Spittin Chiclets podcast is we usually start out all the way at the beginning and how this wonderful career of yours started out and came to be.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm not great in social media. I'm just sort of finding my way, but my kids have been watching you guys forever, so that's all I hear at home is the Spittin Chiclets. So from their point of view, this is a great honor for all of us to be part of it, so I'm excited. For me, I was like everybody else in Canada. It's one of those things. We all sort of grew up with a hockey stick in our hand and a pair of skates, and you start playing because you love it, and I was no different than any other kid that was in Canada who loved the game. And I started playing at a young age. I got a pair of skates from my uncle that were hand-me-downs, and didn't look back. And the greatest game in the world, and I was lucky enough to have a great passion for it.
At what age were you on the pond in the backyard? Was that the first time you ever skated?
Yeah, 2.5, but it wasn't in my backyard. It was actually... There was a river that went through my grandfolks' house just outside of Brantford, Ayr, Ontario, and it went through their backyard, the Nith River, and it would freeze, and that's where I first started skating. But we only went there on weekends because my dad worked at Bell Telephone 8 to 5, so it was Saturdays, Sundays, I would skate all day. And then my dad started taking me to these local parks that had outside rinks, and then, as my dad says, out of necessity, he built a rink in the backyard so he could stay inside the house and watch me through the kitchen window so he wouldn't freeze all the time. So about the age of 4.5, 5, my dad started building a rink in the backyard. I always get a kick because my mom used to say it'd be early December, and my dad would say, "Phyllis, you got to go over to Wilco. You got to go get me a sprinkler head." And my mom would say, "You're going to go get your own sprinkler head. They're going to think I'm a complete idiot asking for a sprinkler head in the middle of the winter." So they used to wait for my dad in December. They'd always hold one back for him because they knew he was coming in around early December. So at night he would just turn the sprinkler on and go back and forth, and that's how he built the ice rink.
And I got one quote here. It's not God-given, it's Wally-given. And I'm sure if, without your old man, none of this would have became possible.
No. He was so special, loved hockey, loved kids. He had 2 minor hockey tournaments in my hometown, boys and girls, and there would be 3 days long, I guess, and he would go there and he would sit in the arena from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. I went home a few years ago and he was sick, and I went to see him. And it was just after Christmas, and I said, "Look, I'll go to the rink today. I'll go handle your chores." And he was so sick he couldn't leave the house. And so I went over to the arena, and oh my goodness, I said to my brothers, I said, "Dad did this 10 hours a day." I said, "I'm here an hour and I've had enough." And it was so funny because as I walked into the arena, this coach, like a 7-year-old team, he goes, "Mr. Gretzky, will you talk to my team before the game?" And I said, "No, I'm the wrong guy." He goes, No, just go in there and say whatever you want. And I said, "Trust me, I'm the wrong guy for you to speak to your 7-year-olds. I'll get a picture." He goes, No, say a few words, whatever you want. And I said, "Okay." So I went in there and I said, "Welcome to Brantford, and it's a great city. You're going to love this tournament." And then I said, "And remember, you're 7. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's how many goals you get." And the coach
Some parents like, "Yes."
And the coach looked at me and I said, "I told you, I'm the wrong guy. At 7 years old, just go have fun. Who cares if you win or lose?" And I remember we always, we had good teams in Brantford. We had guys that, Greg Steffen, who played in the NHL, Jimmy Burton was up and down, Len Hackborn, for a little town of 60,000 people. And we'd always play Oshawa in the finals of tournaments and on all Ontarios, and we could never beat them. They were a better team. They were bigger. They had more kids to draw from. I think Oshawa was like 250,000 people. I remember one day I was like 11 years old, was driving home after a game, and we lost Game 5 and in the finals, and I said to my dad, I said, I just don't understand it. We can't beat that team. He goes, that's the best coach hockey team I've ever seen for 11. They play their positions well. And he said, I'll never forget, he said, but there won't be one kid on that team that ever makes junior A hockey, let alone the NHL, because they have no imagination and no creativity. And years later, 5 of us were playing Major A, and I remember looking at my dad going, how would he know that when we're all 11 years old? But he had a feel for the game, and he just said, you got to be creative. You got to go out there and be your own person, especially 10, 11, 12.
So they were playing systems instead of just going out there and having fun. And the thing I read about your dad is just how important he was in terms of you learning the skill of thinking the game.
Yeah.
And like the old story of he threw it in the corner and he'd show you where to go, where it was going to end up, being. Is that kind of how you remember it?
Yeah, and he'd say it's like a pool table, when you hit the white ball and you know the angles, and you got to play angles and be creative and get ahead of where the puck's going to be, not where it's been. The game has changed so much from the time when Beliveau and Lafleur and Bobby Orr and Howe and Messier, Lemieux, they were so creative. And that comes from being a kid and being a youngster and doing that by throwing a puck on the ice and saying, okay, you go on that team, you go on that team, we'll play 4 against 4 and let's have some fun. If you take 8 kids to a rink today, the first thing they say to is, okay, what drills do you want us to do? They don't know how to play pickup. It's
Control breakout.
Yeah, it's completely changed. And now I watch the games, it seems to be swaying a little bit back towards the way it was in the 70s. And I watch Kel McHarr and I watch Hedman. And these guys, there's so much imagination in their game, and they're so different. Fox in New York, people are calling them rovers now, but they're not rovers. They're really good defensemen who happen to be really good with the puck, and they're always in the play. And it's so nice to see that our game is really climbed to a different level, another level, because these kids, not only are they using their creativity, but they're so talented and they're so strong and they're so smart. And they want to be coached. That's the thing about these kids today. They love being coached. And when I watch games, I watched the Ranger-Tampa Bay game, I watched Colorado-Edmonton the last couple of nights, 2 of the best hockey games I've seen in 10 years. And they're just hard, physical, fast, good goaltending, smart players, and it was just fun to see. It was fun to watch.
Wayne, you would get booed as a kid by other parents, other teams that you were going against. How'd that make you feel as a little kid, and what would your parents tell you to sort of fight through that as a young kid?
It was kind of funny. So when I was 5, I made this team. In those days, you tried out, there was one team, they were 10-year-olds. And if you didn't make it, you played basically house league hockey. So I made the team. And I remember the coach came to my house. He wanted a birth certificate, and my dad gave it to him. And he said, well, oh, my God, Walter, I'm sorry, he can't play. He's too young. So I couldn't play that year. My dad was in this sort of frenzy. Okay, do I wait a year, or I'm going to take him to Paris, which is a little town, which is, there's AAA, AA, and Paris was kind of A hockey because of the size of the town. And my dad said, you know what, if you go there, you're going to be stuck there forever. You're not going to be able to play in Brantford. So I didn't play that year, made the team again the next year, and I played 5 years on that team. And by the 5th year, I remember I'd play in arenas and I would get booed. And I remember looking at my dad thinking, wow, why am I getting booed? I'm 10 years old. Yeah, the arena's sold out. People are in there watching and they're booing. So I'll never forget, I was watching a Hockey Night Canada game, my dad and I, Saturday nights that we used to watch every game. And Bobby Orr was playing in Toronto, and every time he got the puck, my dad would say, listen to how the people boo. And I remember sitting there and my dad said, they only boo you because they like you. If they're not booing you, then that means you're not very good. So I used to like when I got booed because I always remember what my dad said.
and what about the white gloves? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to ask.
The white gloves are such a legendary tale almost.
Yeah.
Like your dad had you wear them for a reason?
No, it was, every year we would go to this little sports store, Lockington Sporting Goods in Brantford, and I would get a pair of new gloves because during the year, I would wear those gloves the whole year, and we'd play 70 games in those days, and then I'd be in the backyard with the gloves on. So after a year, they were worn through, and then what I would do is I would cut them, and I would use them for lacrosse, and so I'd have no palms, and in the summertime, I'd play lacrosse with them. So then every September, we'd go get a new pair of gloves. And so that year, I was second-year Pee Wee. we were trying to get a new pair of gloves, and we were looking at all the different gloves, and every year sort of new gloves come out, new styles, new colors. And Brantford was always red, white, and black. And they didn't really have a pair of red, white, and black gloves left because my dad was always the last one to the shop, right? We got there late, put it that way, the day of or the night before. So really the only pair of gloves they had left was this white pair. And I said to my dad, yeah, I should just wear those. And he goes, oh, you'll have a sort of a dagger on your back. And I said, I already do. And my dad said, yeah, good thinking. And I wore those white gloves. And now every team's wearing white gloves.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wore them for 1 year in my second year Pee Wee. That's how I got the white gloves.
I think you started touching on it on the broadcast. I don't know how much of the story you got through, but you in fact got banned from minor hockey at one point.
I'm suspended. I have a letter that I'm suspended for life from Canadian minor hockey, which is kind of funny. I even know the guy who was president at the time who sent the letter. I kept the letter. My dad kept the letter, which is kind of funny because they always say, no, he's not suspended. But I was suspended for life from minor hockey. And the ironic thing about it was when I became Wayne Gretzky in the NHL, I did so many charity events for minor hockey across Canada, not just Ontario, but all across Canada, whether it be donating equipment or sticks or raising money or going to dinners or golf tournaments. But every time I'm there, I always remind people, I am suspended for life for minor hockey.
Can you guys renege that now? Have I done my due here?
I kind of like it. It gives me a one-up on them.
Not the great one
from behind.
Hey, not the great one, the bad boy of hockey.
Yeah. And it's funny, when I went there, kids had done it for years. And so I went there to live with legal guardians. And there was a kid came from the other direction, I think Coburg, a kid named Brian Rohrbeck. Him and I both went to court, we lost, and I was tired. I was done of all the fighting. And so I had three decisions: go home, which I wasn't going to do, play high school hockey for Upper Canada College. And for people who know me, my high school skills were good enough to play,
Join the club,
go to Upper Canada College. And the hockey wasn't, at that time, as good. Or play junior B. And so I went to a junior B practice, my dad and I. Coach sat us down and he said, you can play here. I'm going to play you. And my dad was like, listen, if you're not going to play him, if he's just going to sit on the bench, it's a wasted year. We're not expecting anything. He goes, no. If he plays and practices hard, he's going to play. And I ended up playing that year, played 2 years of junior B, and stayed in Toronto, and the rest is history.
And the rare event that you maybe had an off night with like 2-1 instead of 7-3, would your father give you shit at all, or would he get on you, or was he always pretty laid back in terms of how you played?
My dad was tough. He was a hands-on father. I remember the end of my fifth year as a 10-year-old, we were done the year, and I was one of those kids that when hockey was done, I threw my equipment downstairs, couldn't wait to play baseball and lacrosse. I loved it as much or more than hockey. And the coach came over to our house, I'll never forget. We finished on a Saturday or Sunday, and it was like Wednesday. And he came over and he said, there's a team in Milton, which is now the John Tonelli Arena. They would like to play us an exhibition game on Saturday. They think they can sell the arena out and they're going to raise money for minor hockey, but we can't go if Wayne doesn't play. So my dad said, well, what do you think? And I said, oh, yeah, I'll play. So we drive down there, and this arena is packed, and it's one of those old arenas, wooden seats, and it's not that big, and they jammed about 800 people in there, and it's loud and crazy. We get beat 8-1. And we're riding in the car home, and it's about an hour drive, and I'm sitting there, and my dad turns around and he goes, what do you think? And I go, about what? He goes, the game. I go, I don't know. We lost 8-1. Who cares? He goes, he almost stopped the car. He goes, what do you mean, who cares? He goes, I don't know why, but these people all come to watch you play hockey. And if you don't freaking get your shit together every night, you have to perform every single game. And I remember sitting there going, I didn't even want to play today.
I had my baseball glove on, Dad.
And I learned a good lesson right then and there that, okay, I have to perform. So it was a great lesson for me because playing in the Oilers, we were a little bit of a traveling roadshow. We played a lot of exhibition games in like San Antonio and that time Dallas and Phoenix. We didn't have NHL teams, and we'd sell out. And of course, they wanted to see myself and Messier and Coffey, and we all would play. And I treated that game pretty much the exact same way as I treat Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it was a great lesson for me. But on the other side of things, he was very sincere. There'd be games where I didn't play well, or in my mind I didn't think I'd play well, and he'd say, that was one of your best games tonight. I remember I got 3 goals and 3 assists one game. He said, I don't know what you're so happy about. That was a horrible game. So he had this whole reverse psychology thing, right? But Glenn Sather was pretty much a genius, and he knew this. And I can remember we'd be playing in Edmonton. We'd be tied 1-1 with Calgary or Winnipeg and go to that city for Game 3. And I come out walking out for the morning skate, and I look up, and my mom and dad would be sitting there. And I turned to Paul Coffey. I go, well, I guess Lass doesn't think I'm playing very good right now. Because he always knew if my mom and dad, if I wasn't playing good, he always flew my mom and dad in, right? And I'd be going, okay, I guess I better get going here. So Glenn had it figured out real quick that I seemed to be more motivated when my dad was sitting in the stands.
I texted Jonesy before the interview, and he said about 95% of your time, at least through minor hockey, was spent on the pond. And he also said that you trained quite a bit with a tennis ball. What was the significance of the tennis ball?
In 72, when the Russians come over to play in the Summit Series, they came over, and we were so intrigued by things that they were doing, and the different sort of sequences of their power play and how they would go up the ice, and then if they didn't see anything, they didn't dump it in, they'd come back and regroup. And so their puck possession was really something we hadn't really seen other than guys like Bobby Orr. And so when I was in the backyard and I'd be doing drills, he had these pylons set up, and he put sticks on the ice, and he'd have me make passes over the stick to make sure they land properly, and backhand passes. And he would have me do it with tennis balls, and he would say, listen, if you can handle a tennis ball on the ice because it's so bouncy, then you're going to be able to handle the puck so much easier. So I did 90% of the drills I did were always with tennis balls. And, I used to sit there and think, okay, and now I look back at it and go, wow, my dad was so ahead of his time. He was so smart. And, obviously, I watch these kids today, the stuff that they do, the one-on-one drills and through the pylons and through pucks. I mean, I can't do that. Going behind the net and lifting the puck up and throwing it in the net. Those are things that those kids practice now every day. And good for them. I just, I probably can't do it.
Wayne, as a kid, you always played against older opponents. I think you were 14 playing against 20-year-olds. When did guys start taking shots at you on the ice, starting getting real physical with you?
So I had this agent, Gus Vidali. When I went to Toronto at 14, of course, when you go to Toronto, everybody's got to have an agent, right? So I got an agent. I don't know why, but anyways, but he was a wonderful man, and he was very good friends with our family. As a matter of fact, the second year I played junior, Gordy's youngest son, Murray, moved to Toronto and played on our team, and Murray lived with him and his family, and just a really tremendous young man. But so Gus used to say to me all the time, listen, I have all these guys in the Junior A hockey, I have guys in the NHL, I have guys in the WHA, and I'll tell you this honestly, Bantam hockey is rougher than Junior B is rougher than Junior A, and Junior A is rougher than WHA, and WHA is rougher than the NHL. And I used to think, wow, really? And as I went along, I really found that out. There becomes a respect factor for each other as athletes, right? Especially when you get to the NHL. Look, it's physical and it's hard, but guys know that guy has a family, he's got kids, he's got a wife. They're not trying to hurt people. There's too much respect in the game. So I guess what I'm saying, the higher you go, the more levels that you play at, the more respect the players have for each other. And so it's physical and it's hard, and you better have your head up, but it's not as... Bantam hockey was much dirtier than playing Major A hockey, I'll tell you that.
And what year... So you wanted number 9, but it wasn't available. What year was that? And that's when 99 became your number?
So Sault Ste. Marie... I played 2 years of Junior B in Toronto. I wore number 9 for obvious reasons, Gordy. And that second year, Murray came to our team, and we had 11 16-year-olds on the Junior B team. I think 10 of them made Major A. We lost in the Ontario finals to Stratford, which we got slammed pretty good, but we were a young group of kids. We were a midget team. And I said to Murray, I said, listen, Murray, your dad wore number 9. I'll switch my number to 16. You can have number 9. He goes, no, Wayne, keep number 9. He goes, this, I want to be a doctor. This is my last year of hockey, and I'm going to enjoy it. And so we had a great relationship. We used to get on the bus, and he had books and binders, and he was such a great student. Went on to be a great doctor. And he'd say to me every time we got on the bus, Wayne, where's your books? And I'm like, oh my God, I never took books on the road. So one day I got on the bus and I had like 4 books, and I sat down beside Murray and he goes, oh my God, Wayne, you got some books today? I said, yeah. He goes, let me see, what do you got? Math, English, what do you got? I go, Gordie Howe, how to play hockey. Gordie Howe, hockey my way. I said, you want to be a doctor, I want to be a hockey player. He just started laughing so hard. So anyway, I got drafted by the Sioux, and I'm up there, and I got off to a really good start. In the first 6 games, I had like 21 points or something, and I was playing really well, and I didn't like my number. I think I was wearing number 19. And I went into the coach, or 14, might have been 14. I went into the coach and I said, listen, can I switch my number? Because I got some guts because I was playing pretty good. He goes, yeah, what number do you want? I go, he goes, you want this number or that number? I go, no. And he's getting frustrated because the number I wanted was number 16, but Arthur Rutland, who went on to play in Vancouver, wore 16 the year before, and I'm not going to take his number, and nor did he want to give it up. And Muzz got mad at me, the coach, and he goes, Jesus Christ, why don't you just wear 2 9s? And I went, okay.
No way.
And that's how the 9-9, everybody thinks it's this mystery, and it was just sort of, well, why don't you wear 2 9s? And I'm like, yeah, good idea, I'll wear 2 9s.
And nobody had high numbers then, really, right?
One guy, Espo, did it in New York the year before. He wore 77. And I remember everybody thinking, God, that's a silly number, right? Like if you went to training camp and they gave you a number 42, you know you're not staying on the team.
Au contraire.
67.
I had 67 and somehow made it, Wayne.
And we used to sit there and go, oh, just don't give me a number between 1 and 29. You didn't want 30 either. 30 was a bad number too. So you wanted something between 2 and 29, and you had a chance. But so that's silly as it sounds. So people don't know this. So I go to Indianapolis. And I wasn't ready for Indianapolis. Nelson Skalbania signed me. I was a 17-year-old kid going to a city that knew nothing about hockey. Nobody knew who I was. I remember they had me go to a mall to sign autographs, and I stood there and talked to people for 3 hours because nobody came around. Nobody knew what it was. I had a pile of pictures, and I'm like, I couldn't even, finally I said to the guy, can I just go home? So I left.
And then they folded the team.
All my buddies are at Steak and Shake. I'm going to go meet them. So I left. So anyway, I wasn't ready for it, and they weren't ready for me. And Nelson called me and said, look, I'm going to trade you to either Winnipeg or Edmonton. Call your agent. You tell me where you want to go. And I was like, oh, okay. So I phoned Gus, and I said, hey, Gus. And he said, this was a matter of fact. He goes, Edmonton's got a bigger arena. They have a better chance to get in the NHL because of their arena. Tell them you want to go to Edmonton. So I was like, okay. And then he goes, and the owner owns a car dealership. Maybe he'll give you a free car. So I'm like, perfect. I get a car, and maybe we're going to the NHL. So I get to Edmonton, and Sather took me under his wing. I lived with him and his wife, and at the time, 2 kids were 5 and 7, Shannon and Justin. I lived there for 2 months with them. He goes, I want you living with me. And so I did that. And the first game, he called me in his office, and he said, look, one day you're going to be captain of this team. We're going to go in the NHL. We're going to win the Stanley Cup. And I'm thinking, Jesus, I went skipping out of that office, right? And he goes, but we're going to get rid of this number. I don't want you wearing 99. And my heart sank, and I went, oh, my gosh, okay. Well, I'm not going to argue. The guy just traded for me, right? And I'm 17, and at that time, I'm just surviving, trying to hang in the league. So that night we played against Winnipeg. I'll never forget. I got a goal and 2 assists. We won 4-3 in overtime. And for whatever reason, I got some courage. And I was never confrontational ever with coaches. I'm like, okay, I had a good game on going in. I go, Glenn, can I have 99 back? And he goes, yeah. So I played 1 pro game without number 99. It was my very first game in Edmonton. To this day, we're trying to figure out. I think it was number 26 I wore, but we can't really get any. Back in those days, we were only drawing about 8,000 people, and there was no TV, so I don't even know. I think it was number 26 I wore.
Wow. Was it true at the time that there was an offer to play a backgammon game to get your rights as a player, or is that a complete urban legend?
I don't know. There's so many stories out there. Nelson and Peter say that's not true.
Okay.
Bobby Hall was wooing me. We had played in Winnipeg, and I think my 6th game, because I think I played 8 games, so it was about 6th or 7th game, And the stick boy came running over to me after the game. He goes, "Hey, Wayne, Mr. Hull wants to meet you. He wants to take you for dinner." I said, "Yeah, of course." So Mr. Hull invites you for dinner after a game, right? You go to dinner.
I'm in.
And so we go to dinner, and Bobby's telling me, I'm going to make sure you get traded to Winnipeg. You're coming here. I want you on my team. You remind me of Alfie Nielsen, who was my center. You can prolong my career 2 or 3 years. I want you here. And I'm sitting there, you're 17 years old, and thinking, yeah, okay, I'm coming to Winnipeg, right? So, and what happened was, the bottom line was, Edmonton wanted Driscoll and Eddie Mio. They wanted a tough guy, and they wanted a goalie to go with Dave Dryden, who was their number 1 goalie, but a little bit older. And so I was kind of a throw-in in that deal. Winnipeg didn't want Driscoll and Mio, and Rudy Pillis at the time, who was the general manager, told Bobby Hull that I couldn't play pro. I was too small, and I'm not trading for him. So Winnipeg basically backed out of the deal, and I ended up in Edmonton. And like I said, I really was the third notch in that trade. If Driscoll and Mio weren't part of that trade, I don't know if Sather and Pocklington would have traded for me. Nobody really knew me. I'd played 1 game against the Edmonton Oilers, and that night I got 2 goals. So Sather knew I had something. But at the end of the day, I was really kind of a throw-in in that deal, which was fine by me. I loved going to Edmonton. I remember I was so excited about going there, and I remember sitting with Eddie and Peter, and they were devastated because they loved Indy, and they'd been there a couple of years, and it's a great city, and they're both from Ontario. They're close to home. And it was a big change for all of us once we got to Edmonton, but I loved every minute of it. I got to be friends with Bill Flett and Ace Bailey and Paul Schmier and Dave Dryden. Really good guys.
So were you guys actually on a plane not knowing where you were going at some point, or is that just a mythical story?
No, that's true.
Okay.
We had to make a stop. I think we had to stop in Minnie. We were on this little 8-seater jet. I'll never forget, we kind of crammed in because, we had to pack a lot of stuff. So we had hockey equipment, we had clothes, and there's not a lot of room in that little Lear jet, right? Sticks on the floor. And I remember Eddie and Peter were so mad. They were sitting there, and the pilot came back and said, "Hey, who's paying for this?" And, no, I'm not old enough. I don't have a credit card because I'm not old enough to have one, right? So I go, I don't know. I don't even know. I got no money. Eddie goes, "Well, you have my credit card. It's got a $600 limit." And the pilot goes, "I'll take it." I said, "We're in trouble." They want that $600. I said, "We're in trouble, guys." Wow. So we land in Minnesota, and the pilot comes back on the plane. He goes, "We're going to Edmonton." And so they got the deal finalized somewhere in that hour flight from Indy to Minnie. And then when we got there, the Oilers reimbursed the pilots and ripped up Eddie's receipt. So poor Eddie was like, "I got a $600 limit."
Do I get the air miles still?
Trust me. Playing in Edmonton, we got a lot of air miles.
Which is wild. So the greatest player to ever play was never technically drafted to the NHL. Mm-hmm. And you were not eligible for the Calder. Oh.
Is that you? That's
nice.
Rick Tocchet.
That's Wayne's ringtone, everybody. That's as hockey as it gets right there.
Tell Rick Tocchet we're busy. I never got drafted. It was interesting because when we went into the NHL, each WHA team is allowed to protect 2 players. And this is really something ironic. So Winnipeg protected Preston and, Morris Lukowicz and somebody else. And Quebec had Real Cloutier, and I think Hartford had Mark Howe. Anyway, each team had 2 players. And Sather was torn between, he wanted to build a team like the Winnipeg Jets of the WHA. So he had this kid, Bent Gustafsson, that he was really high on. He loved him. And Bent only played a little bit at the end. Came over from Sweden. So he protected me and him. And Sather was torn because we had a kid, Dave Langevin, who had just really come out of nowhere and excelled and became the best defenseman in the WHA the last year of existence. And in the end, he decided to go with more of a flow freewheeling team, and we protected him. And, of course, the Islanders took Langevin, which really was a heartache for us because Langevin was such a good player. And then the NHL stepped in and made a ruling that somehow we got Gustafsson the wrong way, and they awarded him to Washington. So we went in the NHL. Wow. We were the only team of the 4 cities that only had 1 player, and I was the guy. And we went on to win all the cups, and all the other teams didn't. But I think we surprised teams at how fast we sort of improved as a group. We were a young group, my goodness. But Sather's philosophy was, I'm going to play these young guys, and that's fine. I'm going to let them learn how to make mistakes and how to get better. He was a great coach. But more importantly, he wanted true professionals around these guys. So he got guys like Colin Campbell, Ron Chipperfield, Dave Dryden, just consummate pros who worked hard and understood their place in this organization, which was going to be, I'm going to teach these guys, but one day I'm going to be moved out. Paul Coffey's going to play here, and Kevin Lowe's going to do this. And that's exactly what happened. But those guys were so unselfish. And then we had our godfather of the organization was a guy named Lee Fogelin. And Lee was sort of he was everything to our team. He was so well respected in our locker room, so well loved. I remember one time he was sitting across from me. He used to sit across from me in the locker room, and he was going like this, and he's holding his jaw, and I go, Fogey, you all right? He goes, oh, I got an abscessed tooth. And I go, Fogey, go to the dentist. So I said, we're 22 points in first place. It's like February. We're good. He goes, no, I can't miss a game. And he took a coat hanger, and he straightened it out, and he took it, and he put it up into the tooth. And he knocked the filling out, and all the blood came gushing down all over his shirt. And he goes, okay, I'm good now. And I said, and I'm not. I can't play tonight. So he ended up being our guy. And so I remember he came into Edmonton. He got traded to Buffalo after, I think, the second or third cup. Anyway, he goes to Buffalo. And he was an Edmonton guy. His family lived there. His wife and kids stayed when he went to Buffalo. Hard-working, blue-collar carpenter, built houses and he would build the equipment racks for the trainers that they would put on wheels and they take them on the road. Fogey was one of the first guys to build those, right?
Wow.
So he comes in the morning skate and he can hardly walk. And I said, Fogey, you okay? He goes, no, this is my last game. I go, what do you mean it's your last game? He goes, no, I got to have surgery on my knee, but tonight's my 400th game and I got to play tonight. And in those days, the way the union worked, you got like an insurance policy after you played 400 NHL games. And I believe it was like $250,000 that you got at the age of 55. And he goes, no, I got to play this game. And he can hardly walk, right? And so we're sitting there, Mark and I and Kevin and Paul, we're sitting before warm-up. And I say, hey, you guys, Fogey's got a bad leg. So tonight, when you get the puck on the left side, everybody throw the puck to the right side. We're not going down the left side the whole game. Nobody's going near him. So all the guys were like, yeah. So we're up like 4-0. Guys are getting the puck, and they throw it across the ice. And finally Sather's going, what is going on here? we told him nobody wants to go around Fogey. And he played that game on one leg. He retired after that game, stayed in Edmonton, and retired from hockey. But he had so much respect, nobody went near him.
So a true warrior, like this is the guy who really taught you guys how to become
not even
a pro.
A question. Yeah, he was, and he was such a professional, never missed a practice, never missed a game, so unselfish. And Sather, when he built the team, he said, I'm going to build this with guys who have character, guys like Colin Campbell and Lee Fogelin, Dave Dryden, and on, and Ron Chipperfield, Blair McDonald. Those guys all sort of passed the torch to us to not necessarily how to win, but how to be a professional athlete. Show up every day and practice hard. Show up for games and be ready to play. And that got passed on to us. And that's Sather's success came quicker probably than a lot of people thought, but a lot of that had to do with the people he put around the young guys.
Speaking of toughness, is it true when you first turned pro that you were going to go no helmet? But Walter said absolutely not.
So in those days, right, you cut the training camp and guys would say, hey, take your helmet off. I mean, that was kind of...
Like, what are you doing, kind of? What are you wearing that for?
Yeah, you should take your helmet off. I mean, I remember we had this kid named Dennis Sobchuk, who was a WHA signee in the 70s out of, I think, Regina or Saskatoon. Great player. And he jumped to the WHA, or he would have been a first pick overall in the NHL at that time. And Sobby, we're sitting there, and I go up we were doing an inter-squad game, and my dad had driven down. It was a Saturday afternoon. And he'd driven down from Brantford. And I'm skating around in the warm-up, and I play my first shift, and I'm sitting on the bench, and my dad comes running down, and he's banging on the glass, and I turn around, and he goes, "Get your goddamn helmet on." I'm like, okay. So I go in the locker room and say to the guys, "My dad says I can't play if I don't wear a helmet." So Dennis Obchuk comes over to me and goes, "Wayne, look, wear this helmet, this trophy helmet. This is what I wear. My first year, I didn't play with a helmet, and then one of the guys said, 'Here, wear this.' He says, it's like not wearing a helmet." I'm like, okay. So I put the helmet on, and it was like, it was a joke. I mean, like, it
was paper mache.
Yeah, there's no reason to even wear it, right? So I put it on, and I'm like, wow, okay. So my helmet and my number were just kind of myths, like somebody threw them at me, right? And it was like, how'd you get that helmet? Did you study it? I'm like, no. My dad told me I had to wear a helmet. So when I went out for the second and third period, my dad was happy, and I kept wearing that helmet the rest of my career.
Yeah, because it's one of them's on display at your bar in Toronto, and it's like a peanut shell. There's no foam in it or anything. It's
awful.
For decorative purposes
only.
If
If my kids were skateboarding, because I'm a big believer, if you're going to skateboard or rollerblade, you wear elbow pads, gloves, a helmet. If my kids tried to put that helmet on to go on a skateboard, I'd strangle them. I'd be like, no, that's not a helmet. You're getting a helmet on. Simple as that.
How different was the play going from the WHA to the NHL? Was it more physical, more skilled? What was the difference like, Wayne?
So I tell people this all the time. I'm lucky. I got that 1 year, right? The NHL was way better than the WHA. But what the WHA had, we had 7 teams in the league. 10 guys on each team could play in the NHL. So it was better than the American League level, but not as good as the NHL level. So that year for me was so important as far as me being ready to play in the NHL. I don't think that first year I would have had the success that I had I come out of junior hockey. So from my point of view, I have nothing but respect for that league. What they tried to do, the players who were in it, they didn't have the depth that the NHL, the league of the NHL had.
And then I think it was your second year in the NHL, I'm looking. That's when I think Anderson came, Kevin Lowe, and then Messier was there, and Curry came. Like, that training camp, it must have been almost shocking. Like, oh my God, the talent we've added is so amazing now.
Yeah.
Like, we have a true wagon on our hands.
You know, it's so funny because we didn't look at it that way. Like, we were all kids. We were all in survival mode. Like, we better play good and practice hard, or we're going to be in the minors. Like, we're not going to be on this team, right? So Messier was 19, I was 19, Coffey was 19, Kevin Lowe was 19, Curry was 19, Anderson, and it just went on and on. Then we drafted Grant Fuhr. I remember sitting at the draft, and Barry Fraser ran the Oilers draft, and Glenn would sit there, and he gave total. The great thing about Glenn, if he gave you responsibility, you did it. It's your job. So Barry Fraser was the head scout, and I remember sitting there, and everybody said, "Who are we going to take in this pick?" And I think it was 7th or 8th pick, and Barry said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest goalie in the draft is right there, and we're taking a goalie." And I said, "Glenn, we're taking a goalie?" He goes, "Yeah, Barry says we're taking a goalie." And that's kind of how the organization worked. Do your job, right?
Trusted him.
And so we drafted Grant Fuhr, and we had a young Andy Moog, and all of a sudden we have all these young guys, and we're all looking around going, oh my God, we're young. Glenn was always funny because he'd have a Christmas party and a Christmas skate. And we had no rules. We had one rule in the Oilers: don't embarrass the organization. That was the only rule Glenn had. There was no curfew. And that was kind of it, right? But he had one philosophy: the team Christmas party, you always had to bring a date, right? Like he did. I don't want 10 guys over the bar around the Christmas tree. You guys telling stories. Everybody, the organization's going, the trainers, the staff. So all the guys would fly their mothers in because we're all like 19 and 20, right? So Betty Coffey would be there, Phyllis Gretzky, Jesse Lowe. But Sather loved it. He was like, no, that's fine. And so, you have the Christmas skate, right? And you go out there and all the kids are out there, and so we have our first Christmas skate, and there's like 3 kids because we got 18 guys who are under 20, right? So Sather goes, okay, this is BS. Next year we're gonna get a charity thing, and so I think it was Big Brothers, Glennie Anderson hooked up with, and the next year, Andy said, I got some kids coming. And I went out in the ice. I said, Andy, you didn't say you're bringing the whole town to Tasquin. There was 550 kids on the ice. Nobody could move. So we had to sort of even things out, right? But no, it was a great group of guys. And Glenn was, like I said, he was so far ahead of his time in the sense that, teams would go into New York and they'd stay in Long Island and say, okay, we're not staying in the city. And Glenn would go into New York. We'd stay in New York City. We'd bus out and play the Islanders. We'd bus to Jersey and play the Jersey. We'd bus to Philly. And we'd stay in Manhattan. Glenn was like, you guys got to learn how to be men, how to act, how to be proper. And we're going to stay right there. And that's what we did.
No kids' gloves. Almost just figure it out, guys.
Yeah. And like I said,
That's great.
One rule. And it was, we go to training camp. I remember him sitting there and he'd go, okay, we're 65 guys here. And I'd like to bullshit you guys, but there's one job open. Just, you go to training camp,
fight.
the coach would say, okay, there's every job's up for. Glenn would go, I can't BS you guys. There's one job open. I don't know if it's going to be a checker, a grinder, a goal scorer, a fighter. You do your job in this training camp and maybe we'll find a spot for you. And that's kind of what he lived by. So I remember one year we had drafted this kid, Odeline, and he was a really good player. Lyle Odeline's brother, Selmar, and he was on the brink of making our team as an 18-year-old. And I think that year we just won our second cup. And the coaches and the scouts and the GM, they'd sit up top, right, and we'd scrimmage for 2 hours, and they would have one of the older scouts coach each team, and red against white or orange against blue, whatever. And so Koff says to Selmar Odeline one day, he goes, hey, listen, you want to really impress Sather, Muckler, and Ted Green? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I'll work the front of the net, you work the corners. So this kid is going from corner to corner to corner. And Sather, usually he just sit up there with his cigar. He never smoked it, but he'd just be holding it. And finally, you could just see him, and he blows a whistle and he says, stop. He comes down and he goes, Odeline, what are you doing? And he goes, well, Paul told me to work the corners. Cough, you stupid. He went back up to his seat. And,
Funny enough, Lyle ended up telling me to do that when I was a kid. I bet you his brother told him to check. Said, get a young kid with this.
Well, that's exactly what happened. And unfortunately, he was right on the verge of making our team. We had such a good team that Sather thought, okay, I'll send him down for one more year. He was only 18, and he went down and tore his knee like the second game in junior hockey, and he was never the same. It's just crazy how things happen.
Now, after Sather puts his team together, you guys are dominant in a few years. Was it as easy as it looked out there? I mean, you guys, every night, you must have thought we're going to win tonight every night, no?
No. I listen, Biz and I talk about this a lot. There's so much parity now, right? There's so much more dynamics to the game. It's weird to see the Eastern Conference that 8 teams have solidified a playoff spot with 20 games to go. Like, that's very rare, right?
Yeah.
There's so much parity in the game today. Back in those days, we go on a 5-game road trip and we knew we could win 4 of those games because we're playing teams that weren't very good, right? And it just, there was 5 great teams out of 21, 10 good teams out of 21. Now, even the 26th, 27th team, they're not as good as the top 5, but they're hard to play against, right? Like Seattle is near the bottom, but they're hard to play against. So it's changed in that sense. There was times where, but on the other side of it also was you got into this playoff mentality of, okay, if we're going to win the Stanley Cup, if we're going to go to that next level, here's how we have to play. And so I think that mindset came into play for us at an early age, and we were able to adapt to that, and obviously became successful because of it.
I mean, we could probably spend an entire podcast just talking about Edmonton. Like, I guess to summarize it all, and the 4 cups and the legendary teams. Like what would you just say about your time there before it came to an end?
Well, it was incredible. I was saying, first and foremost, when I was sitting on the bench, I could look around the stands and I would see the same people at every game. And so when we go out on town, and in those days there wasn't cameras and cell phones and all that, but we got out and we met all the people. We became friends with the fans. And, like when we won the Stanley Cup, we were the first team to actually, I remember sitting there, he goes, Glenn, we won the cup. What do we do with the cup? And he goes, you guys won it, take it. And that's how the cup started going out. Because in those days, the team would take the trophy up to the office and set it down, and that's where it went. And I remember standing there with young Joey Moss and my dad, and Glenn said, you guys won the cup, take it. So we took it.
Oh, yeah, all right.
We had a reunion, I don't know, 30 year reunion for charity, and they sold out the arena, the Coliseum. And we had the Stanley Cup, and we're doing this chatting and talking. So I took the Stanley Cup, and I started to walk down the stairs, and they had taken the glass off the boards, so it was just the boards, right, all the way around, so people could actually see. And I remember right about the face-off dot, I handed the guy the Stanley Cup, and I said, just pass it up and over. And the NHL, they were like, what are you doing? I said, trust me. So the Edmonton people, they're passing the Stanley Cup up. They pass it over, come all the way down, pass it over, and we went all the way around the arena.
No,
Really?
And I said, see, this is people in Edmonton. That's how nice they are. They have too much respect for the game and the cup. Don't worry about it. That cup's, it's kind of like a yo-yo. It's going to come back. And then on top of that, from the fans' point of view, on top of that is the players themselves. You know, we talked about Lee. Kevin Lowe obviously was such a huge part, and so many Hall of Fame guys. And then, you know, so many special players like Mark. You know, the thing about Mark was, and I tell this to kids often, he was one of the first guys I played with that I can honestly say that if him and I walked out after a game and I scored 3 goals, he was genuinely happier than I was, and you would think that he got the 3 goals. So his unselfishness was so infectious through the locker room and throughout our organization. And then we had characters, guys like Dave Lumley and Dave Semenko. You know, Glenn wanted us to be our own person. He didn't try to mold people. He didn't try to change them. And like I said, we had one rule: don't embarrass the organization. I remember guys, we used to practice at 11 o'clock. Guys would get to the arena at 10:45 and get on the ice. And I'd be sitting there going, oh my God. And Glenn would go, as long as you're on the ice by 11, I don't care. Whatever it takes to be out there by 11. And then, you know, like I said, sometimes guys would be a little bit late, and I go, Glenn, what time's practice today? He goes, around 11.
We've won 8 in a row.
Yeah, so he was very, he let the guys be themselves, right? And one time Andy was late for practice, and Slats was really hot that day, and we're skating around. We're all trying to hide, right? Because, you know, so many guys out there were trying to think, maybe he's going to miss Andy here. We'll get away with this a little bit. Maybe he's going to get here on time. 15 minutes later, Andy jumps over the boards, and Slats doesn't say anything. We finish practice. We go in the locker room, and after practice, the trainers go, Glenn wants to talk to you guys. And Slats is up against the wall, and on the wall it says, practice 10 to 11. So he goes, Andy, where were you today? What happened? He goes, I thought practice was at 10 to 11, 10:50. So Slats has got a stick, and he's up against the wall, and he's going like this, and he's hitting the wall, and he goes, what's the last thing that we do when we leave this locker room? And Glenn Anderson says, say goodbye to the guys. And Glenn just threw his hand up and said, I got nothing. As long as you guys are winning, good for you guys. So everybody, you know, and then it was such a diligent group, because Andy was one of the hardest practicing players we played with, and Mess, you know, you didn't want to practice against him because he was like a bull out there, and Kevin Lowe would bear down. It just, they had the right group of kids that loved playing in Edmonton. And I say this all the time, you got to love playing in Edmonton, and we loved it. Most of us lived there in the off season. We had homes there. That was our life. That was our home, and we all enjoyed it.
And going a little bit off the rails, we were chatting about this earlier, but a legendary YouTube clip, and I got to hear the backstory, but it's you, Pele, Bjorn Borg, and Sugar Ray Leonard, I think it was, and you dusted these guys in like a 40-yard dash. What was that games? What was that event you were doing? Where was that?
Stephen Pearson.
Oh my God, you look like Usain Bolt there.
So I was sitting at the World Championships in Finland, and this guy comes over to me. He said, hey, I work with Bjorn Borg. And I'm sitting with my dad and one of my dad's friends, Charlie Henry, and it was a day off. And we were at the World Championships that year. And he said, hey, I represent Bjorn Borg, and we're going to do this charity event, Swedish Superstars, 6 events. It's going to be in an arena. It's a charity dinner. It's all for charity. What do you want? I go, what do you mean, what do I want? He goes, okay. He goes, I'll send you 6 Concord tickets. I go, what tickets? He goes, the Concord. I go, okay. So I'm thinking, all right, take my dad, and took Ace Bailey and his wife Kathy, and I'm like, this is a great trip. So we go over there, and so they have all these different events, right? I think there were 6 events, and I'm looking at these events going, oh gosh, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm going to be bad at that. And then I saw the 40-yard dash, and I'm like, okay, I got to win one event. And so I think I took off before that gun went.
It looked like perfect timing, I think.
I'm like, all right, this is the only event I'm going to, as you can see, you don't see me in any other event, because I think I came probably last in obstacle course. I couldn't get over the wall. I just got to it and I ran around and everybody started laughing. I go, this is the off season. I don't need to be going over walls.
That's unbelievable.
Thought Sugar Ray had a late night the night before, dusting him in a race. Obviously, we got to get to the trade, of course. Now, the 30 for 30 documentary that your friend Peter Berg did, King's Ransom, I thought it was one of the best ones.
Thank you.
And that was one of the first times I think you acknowledged kind of sort of having a role in the trade. I think a lot of people thought you just kind of was sitting there when it happened. Like, when did LA first come up as a destination? How did you end up settling on getting to LA?
Well, let me back it up a little bit.
Yeah.
First of all, that year, I probably played as good as I had played in the playoffs, and that was the year we beat Boston with the night the lights went out.
Yeah,
and,
I know.
came back and won supposedly Game 5. And so we're sitting there after the game. I don't mean this to be egotistical, but when you win the 4th time, you kind of like you're sitting there. You're so tired that the celebration is a little bit different. It's not as chaotic. Like, we were able to control it, like keep the room closed, don't let him in, don't let them in. So it's more family and friends, right? And I remember sitting there, and my dad, and I'm having a cold beer, and my dad says, they're trying to trade you. And I go, who's they and who's trading who? And I go, oh, Dad, you just don't believe anything you hear. And he goes, no, I didn't want to tell you this. And so we went home. There was an event, I think, at the convention center or something. I can't remember exactly. And all family and friends, and we obviously were there late. And my mom and dad were staying with me and Janet. And we get back to the apartment. In those days, there really was no cell phones, right? You had a house phone. And so on game days, I just unplugged my house phone. Nobody could call me. And I wouldn't get woken up. So my mom was making scrambled eggs at about 6 a.m. and we were sitting there, and my phone rings. I'm like, who's calling me? It's 6 o'clock. And then it was Nelson Scalbania. And I'm like, oh, my God, Nelson. I figured, well, he's calling me to congratulate winning the cup. And he goes, how would you like to be a Vancouver Canuck? I went, what? I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, Edmonton's going to trade you. I'm going to buy part of that team. I'll pay you a salary, and you can own 25% of the Vancouver Canucks. And I was, Nelson, I just finished hockey 4 hours ago, 6 hours ago. I'm too tired. I'll call you later. And I hung up. So I'm sitting with my dad sitting there, and I'm going, geez, maybe you're right. So obviously this whole thing sort of started to transpire. And Peter called me and said, listen, because I only had 1 year left on my deal, and then I was an unrestricted free agent. And basically, we sat down and said, listen, you can trade me wherever you want, but I'm not going to re-sign, or I'm not going to sign up. So, whatever they're giving up to you is not going to be worth anything if I don't sign. And so we kind of got to a point where I knew they were going to trade me, but I was able to control where I was going to get moved to. And it came down to LA, Detroit, New York, and Philly. And then New York and Philly kind of went away, and we had sat down and we decided I was going to Detroit. And I remember sitting there going, okay, this is great. I'm going to go play in Detroit. I grew up a Red Wing fan, and Gordie Howe and everything that goes with it. And my dad called me and he said, listen, I'll give you a little bit of advice. And I said, okay, what's that? He goes, there's only one Gordie Howe. And Detroit's Detroit. You don't need to go there. Why don't you do something different and go to LA? And so everybody thought sort of it was my wife that steered the train, or the bus. But it was really my dad who said, there's only one Gordie Howe. You need to go do something different. So that's really how I ended up in LA.
I mean, like, I know we're running long here. We got to let you go soon, but I had a whole Hollywood list here,
go
just
ahead.
like playing pickup basketball with Shaq,
Yeah.
Andy Warhol painting. Like, he's
Yeah.
an icon. Like, if there was like, I kind of wanted you to go into detail about how you ended up meeting him and how that all came about, because he's such an icon. They just came out with a documentary about
Oh, I
him
know.
that
I've
watched.
been watching it. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Actually, his painting of Marilyn Monroe is going on auction
200
tomorrow.
200 million.
They said.
Well, that's good. I got one.
Gretzky will be 200.
The problem is, it'll be worth more when I die. I don't want to die yet. No, but I met Andy. I guess it was.
Hey,
81
maybe
or
we could
82.
make some NFTs out of it, Wayne.
There you go. Yeah.
Here comes Biz, the businessman.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, businessman. Yeah, well, it was really intriguing. I really didn't know who Andy Warhol was till I met him, and I remember I went in this little office building and went up the stairs, the second floor, and he introduced himself, and we ended up becoming pretty good friends. He stood there and he took Polaroid pictures of me for about 2 hours, and he said, "Okay, I got it." I had no idea what he was going to do, how he was going to do it. 6 months later, we were playing in New York, and we did this event at a restaurant bar where we unveiled it, and everybody went. So I think there's, again, I'm not trying to be egotistical, but I think Leroy Neiman and Andy Warhol only did 4 athletes that they both did, and I was one of the 4, so that's a pretty nice honor for me, because I really like both of them. Leroy was a good friend of mine also, and yeah, you know, I always tell people, you know, love the game and have fun, and for me, everybody I met in my life and everywhere I went, everywhere I traveled, is because of hockey. I mean, I got to meet the Pope,
Yeah.
Pope John Paul, who's Polish. And I'm like, he's not meeting Wayne Gretzky because I'm handsome. He's meeting because I was a hockey player. Thankfully, the Pope was an athlete. He was a soccer player. And the first thing he asked me was, "Do you speak Polish?" And I'm sitting there going, why didn't I learn from my grandmother? So, yeah, you know, the game of hockey, it's the greatest game in the world. I encourage parents and kids.
I mean,
love it.
I have meeting Muhammad Ali down here, being in the Rockstar video with Nickelback. I didn't realize that you were in the MC Hammer Too Legit to Quit video as well.
I didn't even know that.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that was completely made up.
That was a
online
long
then.
weekend. He filmed
No,
that one.
I didn't know I was in it.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, apparently that's what it said online. So maybe that's a lie.
Well, maybe they used a clip or something.
Okay.
But my singing skills was only Janet directed me in the video I did for Nickelback guys, but that was fun actually.
And then I guess the one funny story about how you ended up getting on SNL. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because, like, fortunately you ended up going to LA, because I even said today, like, I don't. If you don't end up there, I bet you there's no team in Arizona. I probably don't even get a chance to play in the NHL if it's not for you. So,
well, I'll tell you this about LA, and this is true. When we went to LA, I remember saying, okay, we got to change the culture or the sort of what people think of our game. And so I got in a lot of trouble over this. I came out and said we should ban fighting. And the only reason I said it was at the time that if you ran into people in California or Texas or Florida at that point in time, they'd say, "Oh, I can't go to a hockey game. It's just all fighting and brawls." And so that was sort of the image. And so from my point of view, I was saying, okay, we got to change our image. It's an art to be a hockey player. It's an art to take a hit. It's an art to get hit. Like, it's a physical game. And so we started to sort of preach that. And then we got really lucky. Michael Eisner became a huge hockey fan, and he had a young son who loved hockey. And his young son wanted to play hockey. And the gist of the story was that Michael, after all these games, said, "I want to own a hockey team." And so he said to me one night at dinner, "I'm going to do a movie, The Mighty Ducks, and I'm going to have an NHL team called The Mighty Ducks." And I remember looking at him going, "I know you're Disney and I know you've done well, but The Mighty Ducks in the NHL?" He goes, "I'm telling you, it's going to be huge." So timing was everything, right? And so Michael Eisner coming in, and then a guy named Gordon Gund, who owned Minnesota, moved them to San Jose and said, "Okay, I'm going to make hockey work here." And then Mario was in Pittsburgh, and Brett Hull was in St. Louis, and Yzerman was in Detroit, and Mark Messier went to New York. And so there was just this perfect storm of not only these guys were great players, but they had personalities and they knew how to sell the game, and people wanted to hear what they had to say. And so the game just started growing. So I was one piece of it, but everybody had a hand in that, and that's what's great about our sport.
Wow.
Did you ever feel like you were carrying the game, not just the LA market, but like, were you cognizant? Okay, man, this could lead to like future franchises in these spots. Were you aware that might be a possibility?
Yeah, no, I didn't really think that much. Although I will tell you this, I had a clause in my contract that if there was an NHL team within, I can't remember, 300 miles of LA, that I got a piece of it, or I got a compensation for it. And I waived it when the Ducks came in the NHL. I said to Bruce McNall, I said, I'm not going to do that. But I did have it in my contract. I don't even know why. In those days, you could put anything in your contract, right?
Yeah,
it was the wild west back then. So no, I never thought that way because Bobby Orr and Gordy, who I idolized both of them, and Bobby Hull, they would always say, hey, there's not one guy bigger than the game. The game is the game. Nobody's bigger than the game. So I never felt just that total responsibility. But as a collective group, like Messier and Yzerman and Lemieux and so on, Hully, we all understood where we fit and what we had to do to try to even take the game to another level. I remember one All-Star game in Philly, Hully said to me, okay, we're not going to wear helmets in this game. I go, Holly, I don't wear a helmet anyway. Do you see my helmet? He goes, no, we're not wearing helmets. This will be good for NHL. And so Holly played the whole game with no helmet. I said, I'm not taking my helmet off. I'm going to wear that thing.
And I don't need my dad coming down and yelling at me.
I don't need my dad yelling at me, right?
We've taken a lot of your time, and
Thank you, Wayne.
I know, these long sit downs can get even longer. Whit, if you got one more, maybe, and then hopefully we'll make a rule here. The amount of years that we spend together at TNT, maybe each year we can get you for 1 hour.
Oh yeah, I'm fine with that.
Hey, that's fair.
My wife says that I'm like a garbage can. You step on my foot and my mouth opens. So I'm good. I don't get a chance to talk at TNT. Biz carries
exactly.
workload.
He's the show.
I don't. Hey, that was actually in my notes here. I said we're going to do things a little different, and I'm going to keep it short and sweet, completely unlike TNT.
No, that's okay. But are we going to talk about my lacrosse team at all?
Yeah.
So that was the last thing that we needed.
We wanted to drop the team name and drop the news at the end.
Oh, we got a team name?
I thought we did. I don't know.
You mentioned how important it was in your development, and like once hockey would end, you would play lacrosse and baseball in the off season, and you had the opportunity to be part owner in a Vegas lacrosse team. They have not announced the name. We're going to announce it right now.
Oh, we are.
And
I'm dying to know what the name is.
Yeah.
You know before I do.
Come on.
And I paid. See, this whole job with you, Biz, is getting worse.
So, you own the team with Steve Nash. Dustin Johnson's also a part owner. Any other names that we should?
Joe Tsai. So Joe Tsai, when Joe Tsai calls, you take the call, right? He's a wonderful man, and he owns the Brooklyn Nets. Loves lacrosse. Grew up playing a little bit of lacrosse. I think at college he played, and he has a passion for the sport. And he called me, and I said, absolutely. He really has a belief that this sport is going to sort of be like soccer, and that we can take it to the next level nationally in Canada and U.S. It's a great game. It's a wonderful sport, and I'm so proud to be partners with Joe. And Dustin and I and Steve are going to have fun. I'm not sure. I think next year is our first game. I honestly don't know the name of the team. You know before I do.
What do we got, G?
So it's ironic because this is how I refer to the Coyotes sometimes. It's going to be called the Las Vegas Desert Dogs.
Oh, I love that name. The
Isn't
Desert
it nice?
Dogs.
Ow.
They let Biz announce
Can I be your hype man?
Are they going to send you guys a bunch of stuff? You can come in and be like our Vince McMahon in between periods.
I sold, Wayne. I'll do anything you ask as long as we get that 1 hour every year.
Okay, it's good. Well, I'm glad I got to do this. I'll tell you one final real quick story. When I started talking to TNT and about coming on TV, and I was like, oh, okay. And my kids were like, Dad, you got to do it. And then finally I said, okay, I think I'm going to do it. And my kids were like, okay, you got to get Paul Bissonnette on that show.
Yes.
So I
Come
said,
on.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So I said, okay. So I called them, and they go, we already have him hired. So I told my boys, I said,
That's awesome.
Paul's already been hired. And my two boys were like, Dad, he's going to revolutionize hockey and TV. So there you go.
Wow.
You
What
guys
a
are killing it.
compliment.
You guys and Talk and Ace is doing great. So
Yeah, it's fun.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you so much for coming on. It's a true honor.
I'm so happy to be here. And Biz, you can have mine.
I thought it was going to be the Las Vegas Waynos.
I was going to go with Las Vegas Wieners, Mr. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for this. The
Thanks
fans
so
are going
much.
to go
Oh,
nuts.
thank you guys.
It's been an honor, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.